When I started playing OSU almost 7 years ago, I would always look up to and admire the players at the top, as I'm sure many of us have. It's fun to imagine what it would feel like to be that good at the game, to hit cross-screen jumps, stream 300 BPM, and comprehend whatever the hell this is. Depending on who you ask, everyone will have a different answer, but one of the most impressive skill sets to me personally has always been AR11. It's the fastest approach rate currently in the game, coming in at just 300 milliseconds. Watching gameplay this fast as a new player who couldn't even FC 4 stars yet felt unfathomable to me, and ever since I first saw it, I've always wanted to be able to play it myself. The thing is though, I've tried to learn AR11 a few times throughout the years at varying levels of skill, but each time ended with me feeling as though it was just too hard. I felt like no matter how much I practiced, it was simply too fast for me. I just couldn't react in time, and there was nothing I could do about it. I tried using DT skins, applied gamma, and even watched what few YouTube videos I could find on the subject. Sadly though, nothing seemed to really help. But with that said, it's been a few years since my last attempt, and since I'm currently at my peak rank and have been playing OSU more than ever lately, this time I want to try learning it for real. My hope with this video is that everyone watching it can learn something too, and if you think you might want to learn AR11 yourself at some point, I hope this video can serve as a useful tool for you. I did a ton of research, watched every video I could find, read documents, interviewed some of the best AR11 players in the game, and truly put my all into this video. And so hopefully by the end of it, I can finally learn to play it myself, and maybe you can too. So with that said, I really hope you enjoy. When I first started researching AR11, the thing I heard most commonly talked about was definitely reaction time. Questions like, does reaction time matter, or is my reaction time too slow, are all things I've heard about a million times by now. But I'd be lying if I didn't have some of the same questions. I mean, when I play AR11, it kind of does just feel too fast for me to react to, but is it really? Well, if the goal is just to get under 300 milliseconds, then no, it's not. Personally, I average around 180 to 220 ms, but if that's good enough, then why is it still so damn hard to read? Well, I might have an answer. Unlike a reaction time test, you aren't just clicking a button. In reality, when you see an object in OSU, what's actually happening to your brain is that you're figuring out how to aim and tap it properly. You're identifying patterns and timing your inputs to the music. Not to mention, you're also using both hands at once, which I would imagine makes you react slower as well compared to just a single mouse click. Because of all this, I think it's pretty safe to say that simply having a reaction time under 300 ms is only half the battle, and to actually be able to play AR11 properly, you have to practice a lot regardless of what your reaction time is. Don't get me wrong though, having a fast reaction time definitely helps. An AR11 player by the name of Mirai Hayasaka actually conducted a study on this, and although the datasets aren't huge, I think it's worth talking about. As you can see, the average reaction time for AR11 players is around 175 ms, whereas in comparison to no-mod players it sits around 212. This could mean one of two things. Either one, playing AR11 improves the reaction time, or two, people with a fast reaction time tend to gravitate towards it as a skill set. It's hard to say which of these is actually the case, hell, even both of them could be true, but at the very least it does suggest that having a fast reaction time at least helps in some way. Okay, so that's a brief introduction to reaction time, but there's still a lot more to talk about regarding AR11. I'd say that there's three main components to go over before we get into how to actually improve at it. Those three things consisting of gamma, skins, and refresh rate. So first and foremost, let's talk about gamma. More casual players might not be aware of this, but a lot of top AR11 players use gamma, which is basically just a setting on your monitor which makes your whole screen brighter. This is something I experimented with quite a bit while trying to learn AR11, but personally I found it was always a little inconsistent on whether or not it actually helped. If I put it too high, I felt like it made certain patterns too hard to read, but if it was too low, it didn't really do anything for me. I think the sweet spot I've found is somewhere between 2 and 2.5, but this will obviously vary from person to person and also depend on what program or method to increase gamma you're using. I would definitely recommend it though, especially for a new AR11 player, since even if it's just saving you a few milliseconds, any advantage helps. Pretty much everyone who plays OSU knows that when playing DT, the vast majority of players use skins specifically designed for it. The goal of these skins is to be as simple as possible while having a high contrast with bright colors to help you see the notes more quickly. I'd say that from my experience, almost everyone agrees DT skins make it a lot easier to play, but is the same thing true for AR11? Intuitively, you'd think that it would be, and you'd probably just use whatever skin you normally do for DT, and while I think that can work, I also think it's worth experimenting. One of the players I interview later in this video, MATHYU, gave me a skin that I'd never seen before, and it actually worked surprisingly well for me. Anyway, I'd love to talk more about skins, but since it is mostly preference, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so what exactly is refresh rate and why does it matter for AR11? Well, to be precise, it's the number of times per second that an image refreshes on your screen. For example, a 60Hz monitor is updating what's being displayed on your monitor 60 times a second, or roughly once every 16 milliseconds. As you can probably guess, this matters because depending on the timing of when a node appears, it can mean you're reacting that much later. Now, this isn't super important, and it's possible to play AR11 on pretty much any refresh rate out there, but everyone I talk to agree that having at least a 144Hz monitor is ideal. Something really interesting to mention though is that there's a video by KOIFISHUS where he tries playing OLED on a free 60Hz OLED monitor, and it gave him pretty crazy results. Now, if you don't know what OLED means, it's basically just a type of monitor with really good visual clarity and contrast, but it also has super low response time under a millisecond. In his video, he pretty much said that it was like playing a different game for high AR, and it drastically improved his AR11 reading.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I can't even pass this map normally at AR11. I can't even pass this map normally, I just one-missed it. This is the first time since I am switched to 390 Hz that I have used an OSU peripheral that has immediately resulted in the game actually feeling easier. I cannot believe that.
Personally, I would love to try out this monitor myself, but unfortunately, high hertz OLED monitors are kind of expensive. I think it's also worth clarifying that he's done videos about really high refresh rate monitors in the past, which didn't actually produce the same results. To get some clarification, I messaged him on Discord about it, and from what he said, it seems like the more important factor for reading high AR was the fact it was an OLED monitor, rather than the refresh rate itself. He also stated that he thinks it's pretty impactful for reading an OSU, which lines up with what his experience looked like in the video. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this since it's definitely the biggest improvement I've ever seen from someone just buying a peripheral for the sake of OSU, since in literally a day he went from having a C rank to an almost 99% FC on the same map at AR11, which is just absurd. I don't think the takeaway here is that you should have to buy one or anything though, because obviously most AR11 players don't have one, so it's definitely not a necessity. Alright, so now that we've talked about some of the prerequisites you might want to consider before trying AR11 yourself, like skins, gamma, and refresh rate, let's talk about how to actually improve at it. Now yes, obviously like any skill in OSU, if you want to get better, you can just play more, but the way in which you practice matters a lot. Firstly, I would like to say that mindset is really important. If you view AR11 as something unreachable and think you're being held back by genetics or reaction time, then that's the first thing you have to fix. Before I started making this video, I kind of felt like my reaction time was holding me back and AR11 was just too hard for me, but I really don't think that's the case anymore, and it's not just me that thinks this way. Literally everyone I've talked to has said that they think it's accessible to anyone determined enough to try and learn it. When learning AR11, you pretty much have two options. One, just jump straight into it, or two, try working your way up and getting comfortable with higher and higher approach rates. Now I can't say for sure which one is better. I think ideally you do a mix of both, but I will say just diving straight in is probably harder. I would recommend you have a decent baseline skill of at least AR 10.3, which for those who don't know is AR 9 with DT, or preferably 10.5, which is AR 9.2 with DT. I'd also like to say that you really shouldn't be afraid to use no-fail most of the time unless you're trying to go for an FC on something, since the way HP drain with free mod works usually means if you even miss just a couple notes, you're gonna fail. And starting out when AR11 is already incredibly difficult to read, failing over and over is just bad practice as well as being not very enjoyable to play. I'd also recommend working your way up through lower star ratings before trying super difficult maps, since even though the star rating of a map doesn't take things like approach rate into account, in reality playing a 4-star map at AR11 is already harder for most people than just playing a 6-star map normally. Also, try and remember it takes a ton of time and effort to learn. Think about a skill like speed or stamina. I think it's safe to say for most people those are skills that took hundreds or even thousands of hours to get good at. I mean, personally, I know I couldn't even stream 200 BPM until I had like at least 800 hours of playtime or something. The fact is, AR11 isn't any easier than other skill sets. It takes a lot of effort, and so if you're trying to learn it, don't be discouraged. Like I said before, it's just really hard. Well, that's my core advice for someone who's trying to get into the skill set, but the last thing I want to go over before we finally talk about the interviews is this document by an AR11 player named N. From what I can tell, they aren't really active anymore, but I think this is a great resource to read if you're interested. They talk about some similar stuff to me and seem to agree that you should at least learn 10.3 before jumping into AR11. And they talk about how when they started out, they also played low star maps, maps, sometimes going below AR11 to ARs like 10.8, further supporting the idea that working your way up to AR11, at least on some level, is probably better than just going straight into it. Although they do say they also brute forced it sometimes as well, which I think is fine, as long as it's not the only thing you're doing. I won't go over this whole document, but the link will be in the description if you want to read it yourself. Anyway, with that said, let's finally get into the interviews. Okay, so I won't be showing the full interviews, mainly because this video is already long as hell, but I'll try my best to leave in parts I thought were interesting or insightful. After the interviews, I'll also talk a little bit more about my personal AR11 progress and how I progressed over the past few weeks, but without further ado, let's get into it.
Yo, what's up?
Alright, yeah, I'm good to go.
Now, my first question was, how good should you be at the game before attempting to learn AR11, and does it matter in your opinion?
I'd say it probably doesn't matter too much, though it probably doesn't hurt that if you have some basic aim or reading skills before actually attempting it.
So I'd start off by saying it definitely matters, but my guideline is that I think you need to have decent fundamentals, and I think like a reasonable estimate is be able to play like 6 stars at least or something, be able to have some comfortability with higher AR, maybe 10.3 for like a minimum, but I'd recommend 10.5 at the least. Something a little less required is I think hard rock experience is really good, just because like most people who try out AR11 would be DT players before but not really have much experience, and I think precision is definitely an aspect for AR11 that like will matter 99% of the time.
Yeah, I think that, you know, as long as you're at least decent at the game, I don't think there's an exact rank range. Like, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree.
My second question was, do you think it's an accessible skill set and learnable to anyone, or at the very least the vast majority of people?
Oh yeah, I think it's learnable for everyone, no exceptions.
And what was kind of your experience learning AR11, if you don't mind me asking?
I would say that, I mean, I can't read AR11, really. I have to learn every map I play. It really depends on the map. If it's like a generic map, it doesn't take me as long as a more complex map or something like that. But I never actually learned AR11.
Yeah, of course. I think anyone really can pick it up, but there are definitely like some limiting factors, like what we just said in the last question. But if you have like eye problems or something, like a physical limitation, it would be really hard. So I can't really speak on that, but I've met a lot of people that never really were willing to give it a try just for whatever reason, and they thought like there's no way I'll ever be able to do it. But once they try it, they get like super addicted, and it's very satisfying, and like I would recommend it to the vast majority of people.
So that's interesting, because right now I'm kind of the opinion that it probably is learnable by anyone, but it's like I think it's the hardest skill to learn in my experience so far, but that may be because I haven't played it enough.
Yeah, of course, that's definitely going to be part of it, but I feel like learning AR11 is equal to learning any other skill in the game, really, and it's something you really have to go out of your way to do, right? You can't like passively play OSU and have tons of experience with AR11, but you can just play the game and download like your favorite songs and maps and be able to play, I don't know, like AR9 or something, but it's something you have to kind of go out of your way to do, and I think that's why it seems very daunting at first, but if you focus on it, maybe it would make it a lot easier.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, that it's not the kind of thing that you will train on accident or while doing other stuff. It's like a very intentional skill you have to dedicate time to. So question 4, how can you train/improve the AR11? Is it as simple as just play more, or is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah, it's just play more.
Is that basically all you did? Well, did you ever like play low star maps with AR11?
I don't think so.
Interesting.
The short answer is yes, and I'm just gonna say to play it more. Like every OSU skill, just play it more, but I would recommend efficient practice. So I would say maps that you can't play like the actual mechanics of, maybe something out of your skill range normally, you shouldn't really slap AR11 on that. Probably not going to build good habits. But I actually would recommend playing lower diffs, maybe 3 stars, like before DT. It's like around the hard or hyper difficulty of most map sets. And that's actually what I did when I was really learning how to get very comfortable with it. And I just played a bunch of hard diffs. I got so much more out of that like variety of maps than I did if I were to just slap it on like a farm map or something. Some tips I have to find these maps is just do AR=7 in your search bar. And the reason for that is it'll show up as AR9.8 with the little arrow going up. And that actually goes to AR10.85, I think. Maybe it's like 8.6 or something, which is like, it's basically AR11, and everyone will call it AR11, but yeah, it's technically not quite. So that's probably a good place to start. And on that note, probably I would say to play a diverse set of maps, like play tech, play rhythm, right? And even maps like 2010 to 2025, like will have just completely, they will play completely different. And yeah, I'd say those are two big things I can recommend for sure.
Let's talk about no fail real quick. I didn't write this down as a question, but do you, or I guess you wouldn't now, but when you were starting out, did you use no fail?
Yeah, I definitely did, and I would also recommend it because 3 mod is stupid, and HP will be like 10 or 11. You will probably never play a map that's lower than HP 10 with 3 mod, and that like you miss 2 notes, you fail, like you're out.
Yeah.
So definitely like stick no fail on and just play it through and write it out, and it's like any stimulus, right? Like if you see it enough times, you'll be able to recognize and be faster the next time you do it. So yeah, definitely don't want to get interrupted by failing. That's probably super frustrating too.
Gotcha. Question 7 is, what are your thoughts on hidden in AR11? Does it make it easier or harder at all in your opinion, or is it just preference?
Yeah, when it comes to DT, I mostly play with hidden, and AR11, I usually only play with hidden. But when I play maps with AR11 and without hidden, it doesn't make too much of a difference. I just have to adjust, I'd say.
I would say no, actually. It doesn't make it easier at all. But I get why it's such a common sentiment, because in theory, there's less notes on the screen, right? So you don't have to process so much. But I really think the reason, in fact, like I would say the reason is just because these players are so experienced with reading high AR with hidden already. So naturally it's easier for them to ease in AR11 with hidden, just because, yeah, like that's what they've been doing for so long. Like if you play high AR with hidden, use hidden, but it definitely is not easier, like objectively.
So it is mainly just like preference or what you're good at kind of thing?
Yeah, it's just most people have already played 10.3, 10.5 with hidden, so of course it'll feel easier. I would actually argue in a lot of cases it's harder, especially anything aim related.
That's interesting because I'm like a hidden player, like completely. Like I never ever turn it off. The main reason for that is it's kind of funny. When I was new to the game, I thought it was like impossible, and so I was like, I want to learn this because I thought it was like the craziest mod ever. And so I was like, I'm just gonna play it with hidden every map until I'm good at hidden, and then I just did that and I never stopped. And so now I can't read no mod anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a sick story, but like who's to say you can't do the same thing with AR11, right? Like it's the same type of thing.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Question 9. This is an interesting one. Do you think playing AR11 improves your reaction time?
Actually, I don't know. From my experience, I don't think so. At least I haven't noticed it in my day-to-day life.
I don't really have the knowledge to answer this, but my first instinct says that I don't even know if you can improve reaction time, at least not like significantly, but I think maybe you could take away external factors that are hindering your reaction time, because like AR11 is a big focus thing. Like it definitely increases your focus. But to be honest, like I don't really know for sure, but it feels like you're reacting fast when you're playing AR11.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair answer. I wasn't sure what people would say to this one, just because honestly, I'm not even sure if you can improve your reaction time either. I'll probably look into that in the video more. But okay, question 10. How much do you think reaction time matters? I've heard people say it isn't that big of a factor, but I've seen a lot of high rank AR11 players with really good reaction time, suggesting there's a correlation.
Yeah, I think it matters. I mean, in the end, it's just like, how fast can you like read?
Yeah, and do you know like what your reaction time is at all?
I have no idea. Maybe like 200 milliseconds or something.
Okay, yeah, so I can probably answer this one much better. But my personal belief still is actually that it doesn't matter at all. And it sounds crazy for most people like without experience, because like just looking at any AR11 gameplay, you'll think like, oh, this person has insane reaction time. But in my case, I have pretty much dead average. Like on the human benchmark, I'm like 210, 220 ms, which is right at the center of the bell curve. And that's with like really low latency equipment. And And so AR11, right, just to back up my claim, AR11 is 300 ms. That's the reaction, or that's the time you need to go read it. And considering the average human reaction time is 250 milliseconds, that even gives you 50 milliseconds to spare, and still you'll be right at 300. So I would say it's not a barrier at all. I think like reading AR11 or just reading in OSU in general, I would say it's all about pattern recognition and muscle memory. And it's hard like to explain, but it's pretty much why like learning one genre of maps with AR11, it'll be completely different than another. Like how AR11 jumps aren't going to translate to AR11 like rhythm maps, but that's just because I think your pattern recognition isn't lined up with it, and that's why.
Okay, I'm not surprised by that answer. That's kind of what I expected people to say. I just thought it was interesting that like I have seen, you know, some AR11 players with like crazy high reaction time, like 150 ms and stuff. Like Murray Hayasaka, I think has really fast reaction time, if you know them.
Yeah, of course. Is it actually 150? Because that's kind of insane, to be honest.
Yeah, there's a video on their channel where they're doing the human benchmark test.
Oh, right, yeah.
I think it probably just is the kind of thing where like it doesn't limit you, it just helps, you know?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it doesn't help, but I kind of like, I'm of the belief that it's negligible, or if not, very small. I don't think it matters, really, but
okay.
Yeah. You're definitely right, probably, on that.
Yeah, that is, I guess, all of the questions I had. I think we can call it there if you want. I think that was a great interview. I thought it was awesome. I thought your answers were great.
Yeah, you did a good job interviewing too, and I think you were like a little worried about that, but yeah, it was good. Like I had a lot of fun. So
I appreciate you coming on.
It was very nice meeting you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel weird just reaching out to people, but everyone is usually pretty friendly, so. Well, those were the interviews. I'd like to give a huge thanks to MATHYU and AimBotCone for agreeing to do them, and I had a lot of fun. Like I mentioned earlier though, the last thing I want to talk about in this video is my own personal progress when it comes to AR11 and how I've improved over the past few weeks of playing it. Now when I first started out, it was definitely really challenging, and for around the first week I honestly felt like I wasn't seeing much improvement. I did manage to pass a few 7 stars, which made me feel kind of good about myself, but the fact is my accuracy was consistently really bad on everything I played, no matter the star rating, which indicated that I still couldn't read it very well. Around this time, I had just started doing research and watching videos though, so the ways in which I practiced were pretty poor in quality. Mainly, I would just play whatever I felt like without thinking about it too much, and usually played 5 to 7 stars, which in hindsight were definitely too hard for me. Now, even though I didn't play AR11 every day, in my next couple weeks of playing, I did see a bit more improvement, and also started playing easier maps for a change. I still wasn't really able to pass stuff super consistently without no fail though, but I felt like my accuracy was improving, at least to some degree, and I was getting A ranks a lot more often. Eventually, I even got a leaderboard score on the intermediate difficulty of Moonlight Sonata, which, while isn't technically AR11, is still super high AR and was a sight read FC, which felt pretty cool. Finally, FCing something felt like it was definitely an accomplishment for me, even if it was really easy. But I still had something else I wanted to do, that being try to get a 300 PP play with AR11. I thought it would be a good milestone to go for, but unfortunately I wasn't able to do it. I actually got surprisingly close though with a 272 PP play on Wonderful Wonder, which is actually a 6.5 star FC at AR11, which is kinda crazy. I think it's also worth noting that if my accuracy was better, I could have gained PP from this score, which is actually pretty cool to think about since an SS would be my top play at 487 PP. Now obviously getting accuracy that good is still pretty far off for me, but knowing it's possible is pretty cool, and I think this score definitely made me feel like I had learned AR11 to some degree. I wasn't great at it, but I was a lot better than when I started, and I'm definitely gonna keep playing it in the future since honestly it's just really fun. Anyway, I guess that kind of concludes the video. I have no idea what the reception to this will be. Maybe people will like it and maybe they won't. When I first started making this, originally it was just going to be me playing AR11 every day for a week and seeing how I improved, but I felt like that was too boring and honestly didn't feel like I was even really improving, so I pretty much scrapped that and just went with this instead, whatever this even is. I guess it's kind of a guide, but also not completely, I don't know man. Whatever it is though, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, hey, I probably won't be doing anything like this in the future, cause oh my god, it took me almost a month. With that said though, thanks for watching, and hopefully, see you next time.